very warm welcome to episode 50 of my Doll's House Diary. Now in today's episode I'm going to be continuing where I left off in the last episode, and I've also had some rather nice slate effect tiles delivered which I'm going to be using for the hearth in the living room. So let's get started. So I just started off today by doing a touch-up coat of paint in this landing area and in the entrance hall. So if you remember in the last episode I was just touching up some little splashes of wood dye underneath the window there. But when I actually came to edit the video I did notice that there was quite a bit splashed up along the side wall there as well. So I've touched over all of that, and there was some sort of dirty marks higher up on the wall which I've also gone over, so that looks nice and fresh in there now. And did a little bit in the entrance hall as well. Just put a bit of paper down there to stop any splashes going on the floor. And I also noticed in the video that the wooden flooring was a little bit marked as well. I think where I had the stairs sort of laying on it and then dust had collected around the stairs, it had left a little bit of a patch. So once I've removed these sort of paper sheets, I can give the flooring a polish as well. But what I want to do now is get that little bit fixed onto the wooden beam in the centre there so that I can glue up the chandelier. So I just used my Gorilla Wood glue to glue a little square of wood into place there. But I'm actually going to use a little bit of super glue to glue the base of the light into place. So I'm not a huge fan of super glue, and I only use it when I really have to. So I'm not going to apply it straight from the bottle, even though it has got like a little nozzle on it. But I'm just putting a bit onto my card, and I'm going to use my cocktail stick just to apply it around the top of the light base there. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because I always tend to get in a mess with super glue. It all just seems sort of hard work to me. Right, so there's a little bit around the base of the light there. Now let's push that into place. I want it so the chain is at the front here and covering the wire. And then I'm just going to push that up and hold it for a moment. Okay, so that's that now glued into place. Now I can't remember if I used super glue last time, but what I do remember is that I came back to have a look at it a little bit later on and it had actually fallen down. Now I think that's because, as I said before, this wire was too tight. It needed an extra link in it, so therefore the weight of the chandelier was pulling this part off of the ceiling. But now, as you can see, I've got a bit of give in the chain. It's longer than the wire behind it, so it should be okay. Now I held that into place probably for about 2 minutes, really sort of pressed it against the beam there. But I am going to leave it now, and we'll pop back in a bit and see how that's getting on. But for a silly little job like that, I've just left it so long. But it feels good now that that's done, and it's such a lovely chandelier that it was a shame that that bit was just sort of hanging from the ceiling there. So I'm pleased that that little job's done. Okay, so let's move on to our next job for today. So all of the door surrounds are now dry, and I've sanded them off. And because I didn't write on the backs of them which rooms they were for, I've just gone through and measured them against the doors and then just laid them out in the relevant areas. Now, some of them still didn't fit very well when I've tried them again, and that can happen when you apply paint because you're sort of adding width to the piece. So I'll need to make a couple of adjustments. So what I'll do is I'll just go around, fit one door at a time, and then just make the adjustments as I go along. And I think I'll start up here in the main bedroom. So that's the bedroom door surround in place, and I had to just make a few adjustments. So I just shaved a bit off of the top surround there, and I just did that with my craft knife on my cutting mat and used one of the diagonal lines on the cutting mat, and that's really handy when you've just got a little bit to take off. And then I really don't know what went wrong at the bottom here. When I sort of measured the surround, it seemed to fit okay, but when I just come to put it in now, if I have it lined up against the inside of the door, it was too wide, so it would have been overlapping the skirting, as you can see. So I've just cut a little slot out of it rather than trying to cut a bit off the skirting, because I was worried about marking the wall and marking the floor. So that's sometimes the easiest solution, just to cut a bit out of your surround. But obviously when I held it in place to measure it, I was too far over this way, and I would have been overlapping the door. So that was that bit. And then I've also got, as you can see there, a bit of gapping alongside the surround there. And there was sort of like a lump of wallpaper sticking up behind there, which I used my craft knife to shave off. And that made it a little bit better, but there is still a bit of gap in there. And I'll use filler to fill that. And I've got a lovely new pot of filler come yesterday, so I can just go around once I've done all the surrounds and fill in all the gaps. But pretty pleased with that. And then I also just took a little bit more off the side of the door. That's what that little pile of dust there is. It still feels actually a little bit tight, and there's a little bit of a squeak when I open it, so I probably need to do a little bit more sanding. So I won't get the vacuum cleaner out yet, and then I can tidy all of that up at the same time. As you can see, it's gone into the room below and probably into my kitchen again. But now I'm going to move on to the living room doors. And that's the landing side of the living room door done. And then moving into the living room, that side as well. So a little bit of fill-in to do along the sort of join on the inside of the door there on both sides, but otherwise that was a really nice fit that time. So now I've just got to do the dining room doors. And that's the dining room surrounds done as well. And the entrance hall. And the dining room side was a little easier. In the entrance hall I had to scrape away some of the wallpaper again, because it was just, there was like a little lump of glue behind the wallpaper at the top of the door. So I sort of very, very carefully tore the paper and scraped away the lump of glue, and then the surround sat down a lot flatter towards the wall. So really good to have those in now. I'm going to get the vacuum cleaner out and have a quick tidy up. And then I want to get the chimney breast from the living room into the craft room. So you might remember in the last episode I was sort of umming and ahhing about what I wanted to do with the hearth. I decided upon a flagstone hearth, and I was going to have a go at making my own, but I actually decided to order them in the end, and I found some really good ones from Romney Miniatures. So I ordered these online, and this is a box. I can't remember how many are in there now, but it covers 30 square inches. And you get quite a few tiles in there, and I've ordered a set of random tiles, so I've got 3 sizes in here, which I'll show you now. So you get 6 of the larger tile, which are 38mm square, or 1.5 inches. There's 8 of the medium sized, which are 38mm by 19mm, 1.5 inches by 3/4 inch, and then 10 of the smaller ones, which are 3/4 inch square, or 19mm square. And with these you can create some really nice patterns. So I'm not quite sure yet what I'm going to do, and we'll have a play around with that in a moment. But I also just wanted to say, one lady in the comments on the episode where I was deciding what to do had suggested making tiles from polymer clay, and I thought that was a really good idea, and that's actually a really good solution if you don't want to buy them and you've got some clay in stock that you could make up into either a sort of grey colour or even a sort of yellowy stone colour, and then you would just get them as flat as you could with a roller, and you could create some texture in them as well if you wanted to. And I just wanted to show you one of these tiles close up as well, and the top edge is actually slightly beveled, so you've got a really nice shape there. And when you're sort of going through applying them, just check that you've got the right side facing upwards, so the underside is just completely flat and maybe a little bit rougher, and then on the top you've got that nice smooth edge, and like I say, that slightly beveled edge. So I've cut a piece for my hearth, which is obviously the bit that sticks out into the room, and I've just been and measured the hearth in the study, and that one measures 21mm. So I was going to cut this the same, but then I thought it would probably be a good idea to cut it so that I can fit the tiles into it and don't have to do too much cutting of these tiles, and I haven't tried cutting them yet. So we'll have a go at that in a moment. So I just did it so that I can get one in there like that, and then one along the front there like that, and then we can play around with the pattern. But as long as I've got it that deep, I know that they'll sit nicely. And then I sort of took a millimetre off as well, so you probably can't see it on camera, but at the front that just overlaps by about a millimetre there, so I'll have a little ridge around the outside edge as well. So if you're doing something like this, it just makes sense to cut your pieces so that you can fit whole tiles, at least a few whole ones, even if you do have to do a little bit of trimming in other areas, but it saves on sort of having to trim them all off. So what I want to start by doing is actually just applying some darker paint to these two pieces so that any gap in between the tiles and obviously this sort of front lip isn't going to be seen when the tiles are in place. So for this I'm just using an emulsion paint. This one's called Midnight Black. It's like a really sort of dark grey. But you just want a dark paint so that you're covering up the sort of bright glare of the wood, just in case any of it does show through. And I'm going to go along the front of this as well. So for the hearth here, I've done one of my masking tape handles so that I don't get the paint on my fingers. And with this you really do just need to do one rough coat. Don't worry about sanding in between coats or anything, because this is just going to be all going to be hidden. We just don't want any little bits peeping through the gaps, I suppose. So I'm now going to leave those to dry, and then we can come back and start putting it all together. So my paint is now completely dry, so I'm going to glue my hearth into place. So I measured it so that I've got 12mm at each side. So I've measured it out, and then I've just done a little pencil line on both pieces there, roughly in the centre, so that I know where to glue that into place. So I'm just going to apply glue along this front or back long edge. And then press that into place, lining up my pencil lines. Make sure both pieces are flat against your work surface, and don't worry about the excess glue because that's all going to be covered. Get around there and give it a good press. So I'm just going to press and hold this just for a minute or so until the glue begins to take, and then I'll get a bit of masking tape along the bottom edge. Okay, so I've just laid the chimney breast down, and I'm going to put a piece of tape across the join under there. Just being really gentle with it at the moment, and then I'll stand that up again and then press the pieces together, and that just keeps it a little bit more secure. So I'm going to let that dry off for a little bit longer, and then we can attach the tiles. Okay, so I've created a bit of a pattern here inside my hearth, and I've just had a look on the website and you can actually trim the tiles using a hacksaw, so I've got that here. So what I've sort of had a go at was pushing the whole design over that way, so that I would just put a little bit of filler in there on the inside, on the side that isn't going to be seen from the front of the doll's house, but then it's not going to look symmetrical along the front, so I've sort of pushed it all back into the middle. And then I sort of had a thought about, why don't I make the actual hearth narrower and sort of cut the wood away alongside these two, but then I haven't got much there for the surround, or for the legs of the surround if you like. So I'm going to leave the hearth the same width, and I'll put some sort of slithers of tile in at each side, and I think that will look nice. And then I'll put a couple of slithers in at the back there. So what I'm actually going to start by doing is turning these ones over, and then I can make my pencil line on the underside. I'll just bring my pencil in there. So that needs to be cut level with that one. And then what I'll do is sort of measure in from there and make my pencil mark then at the other side, so that then I've got that nice straight line along the front edge. So I measured back 9mm from the front edge of my tile, and I've done quite a strong pencil line on there so that I can actually see it when I come to cut. And I've got my mitre block here as well. Now this is actually designed to hook over the edge of a desk, but I always just have it on my desk with an eraser tucked under there to keep it level. Otherwise I have to have the camera going off the desk and over my leg, and it's quite uncomfortable then to use the saw and film at the same time. So that's why I do it this way. But these are actually designed to hook over the edge of your desk, which is quite handy. So I'm putting that there in straight edge, and then you just want to go really slowly. So make your sort of little line to start with like that, and then begin to cut. Just nice and gently, because you don't want to crack the tile. And I'm using the full length of the blade there. That was actually quite easy. And then if you have a look, you've got a nice edge there. So I'll keep hold of that piece because I might be able to use it for something else, for another project. And then bring in a piece of sandpaper. What have I got here? This is a 180. So I'm just going to sand along that edge. And although I measured this back from the front, that was just to get the size. So the cut edge I'm actually going to put back against the chimney breast there. And then you've got that nice neat beveled edge along the front. So I'm going to do the same now with this one at the other end. So there are all of my pieces cut. Now with these outer pieces, I think I've gone a little bit too short. There's a little bit of gap in at the back there, but then when I build, or once I've built the surround, that will probably come to about there, so the leg of the surround if you like, and then my skirting board will come around to meet it, so that should cover up that little bit of gap in at the back there. I think I did it on that one as well. So I only actually had to cut 2 of these sort of longer tiles, so 2 to make these a bit shorter, and then I used just 1 to make all of these little sort of filler bits, those 2 in the back corners there and these at the sides. So not too bad at all, and I really like how that looks. So I'm now going to glue these into place, then I can give them a bit of a clean off, get all my dusty fingerprints off, and then we can actually build the surround. So I've got my glue here and I'm using my Gorilla wood glue. On the website it does recommend a PVA, but wood glue should work just as well. We'll see now if it does. And I've laid my pattern out here in front of my hearth, but if you were worried that your pieces were going to get mixed up, then you can always take a quick photograph on your phone so you can keep referring back to it. And I'm sort of going to start at the back with this little slither and then work my way along. So the Gorilla Wood glue is working really nicely with these tiles. But I find if you work quite quickly, if you need to do any sort of jiggling about as you're going along, then you can do. You don't want to sort of leave too long in between applying the next tile, or the previous one may have dried, and then like that I had to sort of move this one over a bit to get that one in, as it was a little bit tight. And you can actually use grout with these, and I would say that if you were doing a sort of larger floor area, kitchen or something like that, then to use the grout. But just for this sort of small area, I just decided to push them close together, and they look just as nice, I think. But in my kitchen I did actually use grout. It wasn't exactly these same tiles, but I can't remember where I got them from now. But they were actually sort of real stone. And I used, I just sort of scored them with a knife like you would with sort of ceramic tiles, and then broke them apart. To break them apart I used cobbler's pliers. Actually, I've got those here in the drawers. Let me show you what they look like. These sort of big old things. Like I say, the ones I used in my kitchen were real stone, so if you go for the real stone, that's a way that you can actually break them. And for that I used like a real sort of random effect and built it up like a jigsaw puzzle. Quite similar to this, but I was sort of just filling in the little areas as I went along, rather than sort of pre-planning the pattern. So that's all of those now glued into place. I'm going to leave those to dry, give them a buff up, and then we can make a start on the fire surround. Okay, so these have now been drying overnight, and I've got here just a piece of very slightly damp kitchen towel, which I'm just going to wipe the surface with, just to get rid of all those sort of dust marks. Don't want to get your cloth too wet, and I wouldn't sort of advise using any sort of chemical cleaner or anything on them. You just want to give them a light wash over. So I've cut the pieces here for the fire surround, but I haven't yet done any finishing, so these will all need sanding, and then these sort of embellishment pieces will need beveling at the top for the bottom ones, and along this bottom edge on these top ones. And I'll also bevel the actual mantelpiece. Now these are really easy to make, as you can see, and a lot of fun as well, because you can sort of do the design however you like. And I'm just sort of taking it apart here so you can see how simple they are to build. Now, I'm not going to be giving any cutting list for this, just because I've already done a similar one in the study, and you'll find the tutorial for that here on YouTube. But let me just get the chimney breast out of the way and just show you just how simple they are to make. So you just basically want your legs and a top piece, and have your top piece going all the way across, and then you use your embellishments to strengthen those sides up, so they sort of stick onto your top piece and onto your leg. So you always want to make those a little bit longer, and then you can do whatever size you like with the bottom pieces. And I've just sort of done half the height of the top pieces. I didn't want to do them too tall, as it makes the legs look a little bit dumpy. So just have those a little bit shorter at the bottom, and then just a simple piece going across slightly wider for your mantelpiece. So I'm going to sand and shape all of these pieces now, and then get this glue together, and then I can add a coat of paint. So my pieces are all now shaped and sanded, so I'm going to start gluing them together. And again, super easy to put together. When you're doing things like this, it's a good idea to use the lines on your cutting mat, just to make sure that you're keeping everything straight. You want to have nice straight edges along the sides. Line that up down there, press it together. And this is a rather plain one, but if you wanted to put little embellishments on, you can do that. And you can use sort of little scrapbook embellishments, or even little plaster ones, and then paint over the entire piece so that it all, you know, blends in or matches. You can score grooves into the wood in the legs or the top piece. You know, there's so much you can do with these, with such a sort of simple design. I've been using these pieces of strip as well, just to sort of help push all of the pieces together, and also you can sort of use them by lining them up alongside the piece and at the top to make sure that you're getting sort of nice square joins. And also with your mantelpiece, you want to make it so it's a little bit wider than your actual sort of main body of the piece. So just a couple of millimetres each side at least, I would say. And then have a think as well about the depth of it, because obviously you'll want to do a nice display on there. So you want to have a sort of decent depth so you can put your ornaments or vases on there, whatever you're going to have up there. Okay, so I'm going to let this dry off for a bit, but I just want to try it into place just to see how that looks. And I've done it so the edges of the legs are just in the centre of those little sort of corner tiles there. So that will come there like that. And I really like the look of that. So I'm going to let that dry off, and then I'm going to give it a coat of paint. And that was one of the other things that I was sort of dithering about a bit. I didn't know whether to do it in a dark sort of wood dye, or whether to paint it in the cream, which will be the colour of the skirting and coving and the other sort of wooden fittings in the room. And I think I'm going to go cream. And I've decided on that just because I am going to be having a lot of dark wood furniture in the room. The floor is obviously walnut as well, so I thought having a dark wood surround as well might be a little bit too much. So I'm going to do that in the cream, and I think that will look really nice, and then we can have a nice sort of wooden or dark wooden framed mirror above there. Okay, so I'll let this dry off and then I'll get the paints out. So I've done a couple of coats on the fire surround there, and I gave it a gentle sand after the first coat, and that second coat is now drying in that lovely patch of sun. So whilst that's drying, I want to come back to the chimney breast and actually create some sort of soot patches on the brickwork at the back there, because that looks all sort of clean and fresh. And although I'm going to be having a log burner in there, I think that at some point there would have been a fire in there, so there will be some sort of soot stains in there. So to do that, I'm going to be using these chalk pastels, and I'm just going to take a bit of the black and just create a bit of chalk dust on this piece of card. I'll just sort of rub it like that. And then I've got here some cotton wool pads, and I'm actually just going to apply it with that. So I'll just sort of start quite high up there on a bit that will be hidden behind the surround. I just think because when you start, you're always a little bit more heavy-handed. So if you start in an area that's not going to be as visible, and then work your way down. And that's actually quite nice. That's not too much. And I'm sort of supporting the paper at the back as well. Obviously, I don't want to pat it too hard and risk going through. So that's quite nice. So let's put a bit on the sides as well. Get into those creases as well. Obviously these front pieces will be covered. And if you've sort of followed my videos for a while, you'll know that whenever I'm sort of adding age into things, I always tend to go a little bit over the top, just because I really enjoy doing it. So I'm sort of trying to force myself to stop now. I just wanted to make it match a little bit down there. There, I'm going to stop. So I'm quite happy with that, just a little bit of soot coloration on the back there, not too much. And then once the fire surround is dry, I can attach that, and then we can get the whole chimney breast glued into place in the living room. Okay, so I'm applying glue to the back of the surround. Okay, like that. I'll just move that glue out of the way. Get that bit off my finger. And then I'm going to lay the chimney breast down And that just makes it easier then to get the surround into place. And I'm lining up the sort of foot part in the centre of that end tile. Like that. Push it right down towards the hearth. And sort of press that into place. And get my fingers up there and give it a press as well. And only sort of press in the supported areas. Don't sort of want to press on the parts that don't have anything behind them. I'm actually glad I've gone for the lighter paint, because I think that really stands out nicely against that wallpaper. And with the dark hearth as well, and then the sort of dark wood surround, it might have all looked a little bit too dark in that area. And the log burner as well will be black, although you can do them cream. I've seen cream ones, so perhaps if you were having a sort of darker surround, you could choose a cream paint for your log burner. Or you might just want to have a nice big open fire in there. So I don't want to use masking tape or clamps on this, so I really do just want to sort of press and hold until the glue begins to take. I suppose you could weight it down if you wanted to, if you put some kitchen towel on to protect it and then put some books on there, but just be careful that you're not sort of lodging them on your mantelpiece, which will be the fragile piece. So the surround has now dried into place, so I'm ready to actually glue the whole chimney breast into place in the living room. And again, I'm going to apply the glue to the actual back of the piece. And that's sort of rather than to the wall of the living room. This way you can be a little bit more precise. Okay, so there's plenty of glue on there now, so let's get that out to the doll's house. And there is the chimney breast in place, and I'm really pleased with how that looks. A little bit annoyed because I placed it too far over this side, and I'm not sure if you can pick it up on camera, but I've got a line of glue now down this right hand side, but I can just very carefully touch that up with the paint. And I used my mobile phone camera and put it inside the chimney breast there to make sure that the holes for the electrical wire, so the little eyelets, were coming through the hole that I'd cut in the brick paper, because I couldn't actually get my head in there to see. But yeah, really pleased with how that looks. So the next job in here will be cutting the skirting and coving, and I'll get that all done off camera because I've done videos for that in the other rooms, so you can take a look back at those if you're not sure on how to cut skirting and coving. And I'll show you that in the next video. And then I think I'll move down to the dining room and also get that to the sort of moving in stage. Okay, so that's it for today, and I really hope you've enjoyed this latest episode. Now I'm going to be filming again, hopefully next Friday, if everything goes well. So I'll be back soon with episode 51. Now I just wanted to end by saying, if you don't already subscribe to the channel, if you could please hit the subscribe button, it would be really appreciated, because it means more people will find my channel. I'd also like to say a huge thank you to my patrons, my little bitsers, whose support means that I can continue to make content here for YouTube. Now, if you'd like to think about joining me over on Patreon and becoming a little bitser, I've popped the website address in the description box below, and your support would be truly appreciated. But if you're not able to join, that's absolutely fine, and I just appreciate you being here with me on YouTube. So that really is it for today, and I'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye.